I lean heavily on magic in this show, as you can tell. Okay, so let's get over to Tom Fishburne for the week and see what he's got to say. As I said, I don't have any yellow marks all over it because it got eaten. So Tom is going to talk about the chief marketing something or other. And a lot of companies, Unilever is the latest to drop marketing this past month from their CMO. In 2019, they added the chief digital and marketing officer. Big mistake if you ask me, because digital is so rife with fraud, and maybe they're equating the two. Maybe they're equating marketing with fraud. I don't know. But anyway, and the new CDCO, which is what they're calling it, Connie Brahms, it's a little small here, said, and no, before you ask, we're not dropping marketing, we're adding sales. Well, they didn't add sales, they added digital. Now, what the heck that means, I don't know. That's like ridiculous. So good luck, Unilever. Because as we know, digital is ethereal and fictional mostly. Okay, so other big companies, Johnson & Johnson, Lyft, Beam, Sun Story, I've never heard of them, Suntory, Taco Bell, and Hyatt. Other organizations like McDonald's, Coca-Cola dropped chief marketing officer title only to later bring it back. And why? Okay, some people think that the CMO field is responsible for results that are often handled by other areas. You know, when I was VP of marketing, this is before the CMO title came to be. When I was just VP of marketing, I was in charge of customer service, order entry, outbound, inbound telemarketing. I was in charge of mailing, circulation. I was in charge of the creative direction. So I had a lot of pieces. I don't think most CMOs have all that stuff under them. Especially, you know, oftentimes operations handles the order processing. And you know, one of the things that happened, we were trying to do something no one had ever done. We were trying to take custom orders with people basically untrained in our industry. And we managed to get it working. It took us a while, but what used to take 6 months to train someone took 6 days by the time we finished. And but we didn't have control of the credit check. In those days, we would actually offer open account to people rather than just take a credit card. And so we're taking all these orders and we're not seeing the sales. And finally, what happened was I went over to the credit check people, and they confessed that they had, I would say, hundreds of orders in drawers that they were holding because they just hadn't gotten to them yet. And I explained to the president of the company that yes, if we loosen our credit policies, we will get more bad debt. It was only 0.5%, I think, at the time, which is like nothing. But the extra sales and the speed would make up for it. And I don't know how we worked that out, but eventually I think we got more people in the credit department. But that was an example where I didn't have authority over that area. You know, the orders got taken presumably well, but not actually put into the system because they were waiting for, and Norm used to say, an order that doesn't pass credit isn't a real order, which there's, you know, he's right. I mean, I get what he's saying, but anyway. So Rebecca Messina, former CMO at Uber, said, when new words are invented or others used differently than they were used in the past, it's because new meaning is sought. One way to get new meaning is to give it a new name, but I would argue that creating the new meaning, that we should first create the new meaning and then name it later, right? Even if, and Sarah Hofstetter, board member at Campbell Soup, said, even if it's just semantics. Changing the title may lead to removing marketing skill from the C-suite at the time when business can least afford it. I think it really gets back to the credibility problem with marketing, that marketing too often markets their own ideas with a shift and a slant, and what we see is that their projections and their optimism match the results, and that's where the C-suite breaks down. The CMO gets axed by the CFO, and perhaps rightly so. This is from Chris Jordan. I'm sorry, Chris Jordan, and he used Tom Cruise as a decoy name. Now, his article explains this, and I'll explain it also. In the direct mail industry, one of the things that all list owners should do, if they don't, is put their own names into their own list. The number one way that lists get stolen in the history of direct mail was always that some internal disgruntled employee would basically lift the whole list. Now you can put it all on a thumb drive and sell it on the open market. And the trouble is, and so in our list pull system, we have a way to put decoy names into the system that even the IT department wouldn't know were in there, just in case. Okay, and the idea is that we put certain addresses in, and the addresses track everything that comes to them with something similar to a certain set of conventions. Oftentimes, what we would do is put a suite number or a box number or just a number at the end of the street address. So it would be 123 Main Street, box 10 or box 12 or whatever. And that number would increment, and the postman knew that it wasn't a meaningful number because there was only one building there or whatever, or knew the name of the company. And so we would use incremental numbers in the address, which would also typically, sometimes we did it in the street address, the postman knew, and that would be a way to track it back to a specific list renter. Chris doesn't get into this detail, and probably rightly so. But we would track, whenever someone would rent our list, we would put the decoy names, modify the decoy names, all behind the scenes, all automatic, so that we would know if that list was used more than was paid for. We would also know if that list was resold, okay, besides the internal security. So there's quite a tight system. And I know it's OBS. Okay, so continuing on. So today, most direct mail lists are rented, meaning the advertiser pays the broker to use the data. To monitor the usage, professional list owners typically, and usually the broker will also include decoy names or seed names. Okay, so Chris made up a name, Tom Cruise, at his own residence as a decoy name. You can do the name, but oftentimes, we will take older names from our own file and mail them without a name, or current resident, something like that. And depending on how we run the merge, those names might get thrown out, even though someone is reusing the names. So it's a little bit of a puzzle, but as long as you keep track of it, and Chris seems to be keeping track of it. And what he found was that People magazine sent him a subscription. And now People may be a controlled circulation, which means they could send anybody they want a magazine. My barber gets all kinds of magazines. And Chris explains that Tom Cruise is close enough to an actual real name, whereas Mickey Mouse and some others will get thrown out by the list hygiene process. Okay, but anyway, so the point he's making is that People magazine gave him a subscription, gave Tom Cruise a subscription, even though it's a fake person. The more serious issue was down in here where he used his son's name on a 65-year-old plus subscription or campaign. Used his son's name, and now his son is getting pre-approved for capital and getting like supposedly credit information. I think he actually called Capital One, and they said they'd gotten it from a credit source. They said, well, who has good credit? Now, the way that question is answered is it's answered by the home address. Okay, the home has the credit. Okay, that's how they do it. And even though when you actually get a formal credit score, but they may even do a credit score, a score for the postal code that you live in, and say, oh, this is a good neighborhood. Everybody's got a pretty good postal code, so we'll sell that as a high credit score area. That may be the way that you entered the name. And thus, this name gets put in even though it has no credit score, because apparently the son is 15 years old. Now, I'm not sure if Chris understands the nuances of all this, but his suggestion is that this is an inappropriate use of that name. But of course, it depends. It depends on how it got created and where it got launched. Extremely interesting. It depends mostly on how well Chris has kept track of it all. So he's suggesting that we should contact People Magazine or Capital One and try to track this down. The courts have been really good about if you do keep track of your decoy names, the courts are really good about substantial fines to people who have misused a list, because the presumption is, see, in this case, it's just one name, I think. Whereas in the case of the way we use decoy names when we sell our list, is the implication is if the decoy name shows up multiple times in unauthorized advertisers, that the entire list has been stolen. And the courts are really good about tracking that down. So I suggest, Chris, that you go through the trouble. Back in the 90s, it was worth $5,000 per illegitimate use minimum the courts would give you. So I think that what you want is, I think you definitely want to chase this down. And if you give me a call, we can find an attorney together for you and maybe make this happen. This was an interesting thing at the end. Funny thing, my wife's name is Maki, and she started getting offers addressed to Maki Jardin. Now, how is that different than his? Oh, it's Jardin. So he changed a letter of the last name to Jardin, and now she's getting mailings by that changed name. Oftentimes, in the list hygiene process, we'll take the most recent name that looks similar. So that makes perfect sense again. So I hope you enjoyed this trip through list hygiene and the protections that direct marketing or direct mail affords the user and the renter to keep everybody safe. But I would like to hear from Chris more specifics. Maybe we can get him on the show. So anyway, have a great day. Like and share. Your friends will know you're smart.